What is up, my little Dados? Vepsis here, bringing you guys the Week 2 weekly recap for the WBE Singles Division in Season 6, as we're gonna be going through all of the games that we got to see this week, very briefly, and then at the very end I will do my power rankings yet again, and rank the teams based on how they played this week, and also take in consideration the Week 1 as well. And speaking of that, if you haven't seen my Week 1 power rankings as well, and the weekly recap that I did last week, that will be linked down below in the description in my playlist, and you can check from there. I also have the trap power rankings done there as well for you guys to see if you haven't seen them yet. But now let's jump into the first match that we got to see this week. And as for the first battle from this week, we have it between Nightmare and Nuzleaves, coached by Automatic, going up against Uzi Gunner and his team be the Bullet Punch Club. And this started off very strong from Automatic's side from what I saw, having the offensive momentum early on and getting the little predictions right versus Uzi Gunner, where Uzi Gunner was a little bit struggling in that sense, getting his predictions right, and he felt to be a little bit from the back foot. But there was one big thing that Uzi Gunner had that Automatic overlooked, even though he saw a potential hint to that kind of set from the High Dragon in itself, and that was a Choice Scarf variant. And throughout this battle, Automatic kept to mentioning that he only needed his Mandibus for Espeon when as a reality. I think he needed that more importantly for the High Dragon, if anything, because he didn't really have any other ways to really deal with it properly. The other soft check he had was a Galarian Weezing, which will be also an important mode that he did not prioritize either at the later portion of the battle either, and just keep overlooking the High Dragon to be a threat, and really banking on the fact that Life Force Starmie was the fastest mod in the battle, which it did not end up being the case for him. But there was also a little bit of hacks involved as well in this battle that I think is worth to mention, knowing for watching, especially from Automatic's side, that this might be something that you will overlook, because Automatic's reaction on live commentary might not be most accurate how it actually was at that scenario. And that was where, at first, the Tangrowth was going for the Giga Drain versus a Galarian Weezing at the middle point of the battle, where it should have gotten decent amount of damage to the Galarian Weezing, between 20 or 30 HP damage on that Galarian Weezing. And from that, we can see later on in the battle when the Passimia went for the Iron Head on the Galarian Weezing, that was actually 20 HP that it was left off from, and therefore the flinch what happened afterwards should have not mattered if the Tangrowth would have gotten that Giga Drain on that turn earlier, where we saw that it got fully paralyzed. So that was a huge play in itself, all those two instances, how they kind of mixed together and allowed certain things to happen. And from Automatic side, the flinch really hurt it, whereas if you look back on it, it should have not come down to that. And in my opinion, Automatic should have preserved the Galarian Weezing on that particular turn for that High Dragon, so he doesn't lose on it on a late game, and he still had a thing to swap in on. So to me, that was one of the big mistakes that Automatic did, leaving that Galarian Weezing in on that turn versus Passimian, and then early on the battle and kind of throughout the battle, he just did not manage the Mandibus at all as healthy as should have. But kudos to Uzi Gunner at the very end. He made his critical calls what he needed to and overcame a very tough start in the battle and was able to clutch it out with Tangrowth, beating the Aces/1v1 at the very end. And ironically enough, Automatic not only lost to a Choice Scarf this time around, which he was able to rely on last week as a winning condition, but also the fact that he was banking on a Body Slam paralyzation on Tangrowth, and then in the end it cost him as well because he couldn't toxic this. So it's kind of ironic in that sense that things can go on your way or against you, just the minor things in that sense, and that just end up being the difference maker this week, that Automatic overlooked the High Dragon, and the little hacks here and there also kind of played a role how the endgame turned out to be. But now, let's go and see how the second battle went in this week. And as the second battle to cover from this week will be between San Diego Team Chargers, coached by MV, going up against Steve and his team be the Milwaukee Saucebox. And this started pretty rough for Steve, and it didn't get any better from there as we watched them from each side. And we saw that Steve led out with the Cinccino, got a 50-50 call in his own head wrong, in a sense that he expected the Bronzo go for the Stealth Rocks turn 1, and instead he goes for the knockoff to retaliate for that play, predicting that, and then he got body pressed on that turn. And from there, it didn't get any better from there, because then he wanted to go for the U-turn, going to the Chandelure instead, and avoid the Cinccino to die, but MV makes the proper middle ground play, goes for the Earthquake, which would have finished the Cinccino off, but also covered the Chandelure on the switch, which meant that the Chandelure all of a sudden was also at 40%, so in 2 turns, Steve is already on a back foot and almost lost 2 mons, and they are pretty much in a low health, and eventually, he also lets the Chandelure go down on the Lantern as well, going for a Volt Switch after being able to get a couple of hits off on that Assault Vest Lantern, but to me that was also a little bit of downfall and something that he might have regretted later on, because Chandelure was his only special attacker that he brought this week, and MB brought a Iron Defense Body Press Bronzong versus him, and then he did not have anything to really break it down until he had to lose his Komodo in the progress, and eventually came down to the point that Centiskorch was able to basically beat his Comfey, his Ferrothorn, and the Barraskewda also was earlier on dealt with, because Steve swapped it into an Air Slasher and it eventually died to that. So it was a really tough and uphill battle for Steve, also due to the fact that I think matchup wise it was poor matchup for him on paper. Team building wise, I think MV definitely out-prepared him, and Steve definitely can improve on this aspect in upcoming weeks, that he should be focusing more on his team building aspect, and then as he goes into the battles, those little mistakes that can cost you a lot and don't gain you enough to make those kind of risky plays. This is kind of an example of that he cannot really fall to do those kind of plays which don't really benefit enough instead what could happen instead to him. So unfortunately that was the case for Steve. Good game to MV for sure. I think he didn't really have to make predictions more so ever on this matchup. He always made the same plays, but they were always enough because he had a solid team build and he just allowed his team to execute the game plan from there. So that's what I really have to say from this week. A good game for MB, and Steve, hopefully going forward he can bounce back from this after this battle was a lot rougher loss to him than the previous week, for example, was. But now let's go and see how the third battle went in this week. And as the third battle for us to cover from this week will be between New York 3-Bits coached by PokeAMD going versus a Pittsburgh Pitsus and coached by Nexus. And this didn't start too well, similar to Steve on the previous battle, where Nexus led out with his Choice Scarf Keldeo as Joey led out with the Slowbro. He goes for the flip turn, hoping that worst case scenario, if the Rillaboom has to take a Scald, he would not get burned, but of course, as Nexus swap into the Rillaboom, he gets a turn 1 burned, and that was pretty much the downhill from there, cause once we saw that happening, we get to see more and more how the Slowbro seemed to be unbreakable wall and a mon for Nexus to really beat 1v1. He lost his V-Val to the body press. Rillaboom with Woodhammer did barely have, even though it was Miracle Seed boosted and Terrain boosted, and ended up just killing itself, and Slowbro just sat in front of it and did not even care for it. So it was a really tough ride for Nexus in that sense, and team building aspect, I think he could have done more for himself to be able to pivot around the Slowbro's attacks. To me, like a Trace Gardevoir would have been beautiful here, like especially defensive like he ran last week, for example, just to give him a slow teleport on a Slowbro, gain the health back from the regenerator that it would be tracing in itself, and then give himself a free switching to Rillaboom and go from there. I think that would have made a huge difference on his team building aspect and to this battle in itself. And from Joey's side, it wasn't too perfect, like it was almost perfect. There was a one play that he mentioned himself from live commentary that he wasn't happy that he did, and he got away with it, which was that he swapped his weakened Slowbro to gain the regenerator, went to his Gigalith as the Hitmonlee came in, and he got the Unburden boost from the Miracle Seed, from the Grassy Seed that it ran. But if that Hitmonlee would have been bulk upset, that was definitely a misplay, allowing it potentially set up further along in front of Gigalith, whereas if he would have swapped into Sylvia on hard immediately on the first time, he would not allow Hitmonlee set up further than +1 potentially. So that was something that Joey mentioned on his live commentary, that was definitely a mistake, but outside of that, similar what MV did on his previous game that we covered, Joey did not really make many mistakes either, like barely any barring that one time. And preparation just was very solid. Slowbro got to do what it does its best. Credit for Nexus at least for mentioning on this, compared to his week 1 battle, he did manage the timer a lot better this time around. Now to me, it's like the biggest thing that I see him having to improve on is team building and coming up a game plan and good outs versus the most annoying modes for him to switching on. For example, this week, the Slowbro. So I think that's something that Nexus has to take away from this to be able to really bounce back from this after taking another big loss. But hopefully he can do that. I'm a big fan of him, as I've been saying, and just a great play from great game from Joey's side and great preparation as well, deserving the win. And now let's jump into the 4th battle that we had this week. And as the 4th battle from this week, we have it between Detroit Steel Winds coached by Crimson Seabat going up against Starchas coached by Fanatax. And we're going to be starting this off with the lead scenario that we saw. Seabat leading up with his Skarmory and Fanatax leading up with his Durant. And the Durant goes for the Home Claws turn 1 and then for the Thunderfang in turn 2. And to me, this offensive pressure that Fanatax was able to provide in first 2 turns was huge for him, but for whatever reason he decides that he needs to swap out his Durant, even though I don't think he had any reason to do so, and swap into his Hatrini on an upcoming Brave Bird that he was expecting. But this Skarmory ended up going for the body press anyway. So me, either way, that was a huge misplay from my perspective on Fanatax's side. Because I think he had a good offensive pressure and he was forcing Crimson Seabat to make a choice. And I don't think he needed to do anything else and keep at it what he was doing and kept clicking Thunderfangs. And then we jump into a scenario which we saw in the middle point of the battle where Aromatisse was versus a Kyurem, which mind you get to see that Kyurem goes for the Dragon Dance as the Kudra was in front of it, but it was able to force it out and go into Aromatisse, and he gets that one right. So kudos on Fanatax, but then he gets dicey because Aromatisse actually gets double protect, which wasn't intentional because Crimson Seabat misclicked on the second one. He meant to go for the Moonblast, but he didn't. And then a couple of turns later, as the Kyurem is predicting Aromatisse to go for something else, Aromatisse goes for the Moonblast as the Kyurem went for the Roost, and then we get to see the critical hit, which should have not in all intents and purposes killed it that from that range, I believe. So it was kind of unfortunate to see that Fanatax yet again putting up offensive pressure and Seabat on the back foot, and the Crimson Seabat gets away with it this time around due to his luck from that situation. But the 3rd time is a charm when finally Fanatax is completely in the corner with his Pangoro and Quagsire left. We see that Seabat has all of his 6 moves available and Kudra at half health in the front of the field, and then the Pangoro comes in, and this where the shit goes down basically for Seabat because Fanatax pulls the trigger as Crimson Seabat makes the quote-unquote safe play, but actually the choke play of preserving the Kudra, swaps into Skarmory, and Pangoro goes into +2. It's gonna be Life Orb, Drain Punch, and Iron Fist, along with Bullet Punch as a priority. Those 3 moves basically were enough for Fanatax to pull this all the way back, and we get to see Pangoro killing everything. Skarmory goes to the Drain Punch, and everything else gets picked by +2 life for Bullet Punch coming from a Pangoro, and that was insane to watch. And at the very end, Pangoro dies to its own Life Orb recall, and the Quagsire is the last mon standing in the way on the back because he never got to actually see the field, and that is going to be a 1-0 win for Fanatax. Granted, great game for Fanatax, he pulled the trigger, he was putting himself in offensive position, but now on the 3rd time's the charm, it came finally through for him. Due to some of not to be his fault, and the first scenario with Durant being his fault that he gave up on that situation. But Crimson Seabat, I think he should have gotten a 5-4 win if it wasn't for the fact that he preserved that Kudra for no reason. He should have just let it go down and go for the attack, hope that he outsped the Pangoro, and then gone into his Skarmory safely and played it from there. But that is going to be the fourth battle from this week, and now we get to see the fifth battle, how that went. And as the fifth battle from this week, we have it between Dundee Dillis coached by Callum going up against Philadelphia Scissors coached by Impact, and yet again we get another game that was a 1-0 win for one side, and that is crazy from WBE. From 2 weeks we have gotten so many of these kind of results, and this was a really fun game to watch as well. And to me, maybe the most competitive game. There was another one that seemed to be very competitive at the very end that we haven't covered yet, and Ushikana vs Automatic was very close one and competitive as well. But into this matchup, this was actually a classic example of both sides bringing a bulky team fearing the opposing offensive and setup threats that others have possessed, and we saw from the how painful it was for Callum to be able to break through the Gorgai set that Team Back Brawl, which was Shadow Sneak, Poltergeist, Synthesis and Toxic. That was a huge pain for him. We got to see that Chimpact actually pulled the trigger of bringing hazard stacking versus a team with Tentacruel, Serena, and even Cinderace with a Cold Chain. So Chimpact really took a quote-unquote a gamble with that, because it was pretty hard to be able to keep all of those hazards up, and he wasn't able to do that anyways. We got to see a rather cool little sneaky techs to be able to wear down that Cinderace from Chimpact's side with the Rocky Helmet Appleton. The Aqua Gem from the Quillfish was really cool to see. But then we get to see Callum making some plays, man. He seems to be comfortable this week. He got rid of his rust, he got rid of his nervousness for the most part. We got to see him going for the Knocko, predicting the Scissor on a switch. He got lucky and bad, I guess what I would call it, with getting the Scalp Burn on the first try on the Scissor as well, which is unfortunate, but that was something that Chimpact was risking himself as. And then we got to see as well the very end of the battle where the Flygon predicting the freaking Sigilyph on the swap when he thought that Chimpact would be taking advantage of his Serena coming on his Crocodile. He thought that, okay, that Sigilyph will come in on me, I'm gonna crunch again, even though there's an intimidating Crocodile with Choice Scarf in front of me and I'm locked into crunch. And my god, that play got me hyped for Callum, man. I was like, this battle really showed that, okay, the week one was all kinds of mulligan and he was fortunate to win it, but now he's showing what he can truly do when he's comfortable. And I gotta say, man, like, Chimpact has also a little bit of unfortunate luck that the opponents that are showing up for his first 2 weeks, they seem to have their battle of the week, and he has to be the receiving end of it and taking that very, very narrow 1-0 loss. And at the very end we saw that Serena picked off his Choice Scarf Crocodile with the drop kick. So to me, really cool game. Big props to Callum. Now I'm buying into him be able to do some work this season. And even though Chimpact is 0-2, I think he has been really competitive. It's just those minor little things that he's getting wrong, especially at the late game. But this goes to credit to Callum, honestly, from that great prediction. And Chimpact recognized that as well at his video and after the battle in itself. So great game. Make sure to check it if you haven't yet. But now let's go and see the 6th matchup of this week. And as the 6th battle from this week, we have it between Puddle Rock Butterfreeze coached by That's +1 going up against Gorgia Gummies coached by Fruitberries. And to me, by far the craziest battle that I have seen in my Draft League career, especially on a YouTube side of things. It's gonna be hard to top it, cause like check these sets out, which you're gonna be seeing on the screen right now. Like, he led out with the Dreadnought, which is mono attacking Life Orb set with Stealth Rocks and Sword Dance and Attract on it. And he actually predicted the proper genders versus his opponent, which is a crazy prediction of his own. He reminds me of Ursulabai in some ways when he's running these kind of sets. Then that does his stuff from there. Then we see the substitute Encore Sword Dance Knockoff Zoroark, which somehow, someway works out perfectly how his opponent is playing, because his opponent is playing it absolutely the worst way possible that you could think of. Because first, he gets to see the Zoroark set with his Ditto. He gets knocked off from his Choice Scarf, so the next time around that he's gonna be swapping into this thing and get itself turned into it, he's gonna potentially risk a speed tie. But that's not the worst case scenario that could happen. Then he goes into the Clefable and goes for the Thunder Wave, when he literally just saw earlier that he has Substitute and Encore on that Zoroark. How do you manage to think yourself to the point that, yeah, Thunder Wave is my play, by the way? Not Moonblast. Nope. Nope. So we are gonna just turn away this thing. It's crazy how it played out, because then it turns out to the point that Clefable is forced out because it's uncaught in the Thunder Wave, and the Zoroark is behind the substitute. He goes into Ditto, he cannot turn into it because it's behind the substitute, so eventually the Clefable has to come in yet again, and then then he gets sacked to the Zoroark anyways. Managed to break this up, by the way. Ditto comes in, wins the speed tie. If Ditto did not win the speed tie, the game would have been over right there. That's how close this game would have been ending for that Zoroark setting itself, working out beautifully for no reason at all, considering the setting itself. And then we get to the point that it kind of gets even at that point, like it doesn't get that crazy from either side. They are playing it like here and there, kind of positioning. And eventually we get to the point that the Phalanx comes in from the Butterrock Butterfree side and decides to go for the game, because it goes for the signature move, which gives it +1 on every single stat, and it carries close combat and a rock slide. And we have Xatu left, and we have the Marowak left from the opposing side. So you would think that the Butterrock Butterfrees have no reason ever for the rest of the battle click close combat in front of what they have left, especially the Xatu in front of them, which ×4 resisted. And then there's a Marowak in the back that is completely immune to it in itself. Well, it clicks it anyways in front of the Xatu. Butterrock Butterfree's coach says that, oh, that's +1 said that he knew that it was a resisted hit, but I guess he forgot that it's ×4 resisted and it's not gonna kill the Xatu from that range. And then he gets the chance to go for the Trick Room, goes for the Psychic, finishes off the Phalanx, and then the timer ends there, and they decided that they're gonna theorem on the rest of the battle how it would have went, and they decided that yeah, Georgikumis would have won it 1-0 fashion, and that's gonna be that. The reason why it went on the timer in itself is not because one of them used all of their time in a chess timer. They actually used the wrong timer in itself, because for whatever reason they didn't get the chess timer working properly. God knows what happened there. And then the timer that they used, which was 30 minutes, wasn't enough for them anyways to play at the very end of the battle. So one of the craziest battles I've never seen, and I would go out and say this is the craziest battle we get to see this season for all of the wrong reasons in the WBE Singles division. So now let's further along move on to the 7th battle that we got to see this week. And as the 7th battle from this week, we have it between Sin City Seesaws coached by Patty Trules going up against Triple IP Plus coached by James W. Beak. And this was pretty interesting matchup in a sense that James W. Beak was able to put a lot of offensive pressure with a monster that you don't expect, especially starting out with their Mungus, putting early on a pressure into Sin City's size, not being able to really know which one to swap into, as they use Alcremie and then Golurk as their pivoting ways around their Mungus, and eventually he got around it early on, but it was quite funny to watch that how that mon put so much pressure on him. But it doesn't end there. Then the Nasty Blood Rotowas actually puts up a lot of pressure afterwards, forcing the Jolteon out after getting a +2 special attack boost, while Jolteon traded Toxic off on it, but then the Alcremie goes down to the +2 Hydro Pump. So the Alcremie goes down very early on this battle, thanks to the Rotowas putting so much offensive pressure, and then we get to see that Choice Specs Frostlash, which looked very good on team review for this matchup, gets to put up a lot of work. And granted, the Jolteon got created by the Shadow Ball on the switch, but it only mattered in a sense that Patty Trules couldn't know that it was Choice Specs at the time. And then comes the situation when the Necrozma was brought in, and it's going to be that Dragon Dance weakness policy set yet again like in week 1. But this time around, Patty Trules get confused by the Showdown calculator that it actually is really annoying with the Photo Degeyser, cause he was expecting the Photo Degeyser to kill the Rhyperior after the Axis or damage, but the Showdown calc, how it shows is that it shows at first a special Photo Degeyser, and you have to manually change it to physical on that option in itself in a calc before you get to see how much the +2 physical Photo Degeyser would have done. And then the actual battle, it throws him off and gets him to the point that he threw away his winning condition very early. Granted, it was never going to sweep Triple IP Flops because he had the Mach Punch on the Conkeldurr, which definitely always killed the Conkeldurr from the range that the foreplay was leaving it from after the Umbreon hit it with that width, and got that weakness policy going. And from there it got to the point that eventually came down to a timer, because similarly how Nexus really mismanaged his timer, this was an example where Paddy Trills came to the battle, spent a lot of time calking and not really seemed to have a really good game plan how to get around the mons, and that's where the Amoonguss and Roto Was, for example, came into a case how they were able to put up the pressure. He spent a lot of time getting around those things, and at the very end he lost a little bit of difference, so this should have been like a 3-0 loss to him, but he missed his place kick on Amoonguss, which would have given him a kill. But at the very end, how the game was going, the Choice Specs Frost Slash would have cleaned out the game anyways if it didn't come down to timer, either being a 3-0 if he landed that place kick or being that 4-0 at that point of time. So pretty good game for Triple I People's side. I'm very happy to see that on their second ever Draft League battle, the nerves are similarly gone like Callum's were from his battle from week 1 going to week 2, and now James WB seemed to get his footing, and he definitely seemed to be more confident and had a better idea how to execute his own team building aspect. So kudos to him. Since it is size and Paddy Trill's side, he seems still to be very unsure what he's doing in the battles. The team building is not really there, so he really needs to step up his game in that sense. There are a couple of other teams that we covered already earlier, that like Nexus's team, that share the same weakness, and hopefully they can shake themselves off going into week 3 and onwards for the rest of the season. But now let's go and see the final battle that went in this week. And then the last battle of the week will be between the Antarctic Aces Lasses coached by Visually going up against the Wakanda Vivas coached by Moet himself. And this battle was pretty crazy in a lot of ways, because this started off with the fact that Chiratsi coming into this matchup had a perfect 4 moveset, a special attacker holding the Okaberry that had coverage for everything that Moe brought for this matchup. He had the Psy Shock, it had the Aura Spear to hit the Duraludon, he had the Energy Ball hit to the Seismitoad, he had the Ancient Power to hit the Volcarona, and even got the boost while at it, which was crazy in itself. And speaking of the Volcarona, it was a Heat Rock Sunny Day for the Venusaur that came afterwards that, and it landed the Sleep Powder, which was so close, because if it didn't land that, it could have been over just there for the Chiratsi, and Chiratsi would have said GG and left it from there. But it wasn't like that. The Venusaur got the Sleep Powder off, and he was able to kill it with the following Weather Bars coming out of the sun, along with the Life Orb boost with it. And then we get to the point that Scrafty and Venusaur go back and forth a little bit stalemate with Sleep Powders and Bulk Ups and Knockoffs, and you get to see all of the shenanigans that they got to do it. So granted, Scrafty also gets pretty lucky after it got critted by Giga Drain from Venusaur. He gets the first turn wake up, he goes for the rest, and then he gets a first wake up yet again with this Shed Skin as well. So it was a really crazy shenanigans and extends between the Venusaur and Scrafty, but eventually Visually pulls the trigger, goes into his Jogalsi using as a slow pivot in front of a +1 Venusaur, going for a Giga Drains and whatnot, and then he gets his Alakazam in with the Psy up, traces the boost that Venusaur had, is able to finish that thing off. And then the Galvantula with the focuses of its own is able to revenge kill that. And then eventually we got to the point that each of the side are trying to get their setup sweeper in before the other one. Before anything else, the Duraludon came in, got the screens up, while the Scrafty was brought in by Visually after he sacked the proper things to get it in for free. And then it really came down to the point that what kind of set the Gyarados was running with the coverage. And from Moet's side, if you didn't see it, ran a Power Whip, Earthquake and Stoners. None of them that can really hit Scrafty too hard, and none of them were actually stabs either, which is crazy. So the Scrafty with the Bulk Ups able to stall out a couple of the Reflect turns, and then as Moet makes his finally the call go into his Gyarados and set up along with it, eventually the Reflect goes off, and then the Scrafty at +4 I think was able to kill it with a knockoff, and then the Duraludon is the only thing left. Only move hitting was the Thunderbolt, and it was basically over from there. So crazy game. To me, Visually played it pretty well in some aspect, and at the same time he also kind of gave up a lot of things early of the battle, but in the end he kept his winning condition Scrafty intact. He knew that he had to set up before the Gyarados would be able to do, and that was in the end the difference that he made it as a 3-0 win. To me it doesn't seem like a blowout 3-0 win. To me this was like a closer 3-0 win, that the other opponent just happened to get his setup threat before the other one, and that ultimately decided. But now, as we have seen all of the battles how they went, let's now go and see how my power rankings have been changed from seeing these week 2 battles. And these are my power rankings for the WBE Singles Division after the Week 2 battles have been done. And if you enjoyed the editing that I put effort into for this video, leave a like so I know for sure to keep up with it. And it really will keep me motivated if I see you guys enjoying those. But regards to very briefly about my rankings, as you can see, the top end and the bottom half of the rankings, they pretty much remain the same, just very minor movement if any. But on the middle field we see a lot of movement. The biggest winner of this week being the Dundee Dealers, coached by Callum, impressed me a lot this week and really give me the confidence to believe in them going into week 3. Then we have a couple of teams that move out the 3 slots this week, being Bullet Punch Club, coached by Uzi Gunner, and Star Just, coached by Fein Attacks. And then we have 2 slot movement, which I want to mention, being Triple I Piplops to number 13, coached by James W. Big, who also impressed me, and I saw a lot of improvement from his week 1 performance. So that will be my WBE week 2 recap and the power rankings video for you guys. Hopefully you all enjoyed it again, and hopefully next week I can bring this out a little bit sooner, because this end up being a Friday upload yet again. But hopefully you're excited to see the WBE week 3 battles for the singles division like I am, and honestly I do also enjoy following the VCC as well, so stick tuned for those as well from the WBE side. And hopefully I get to see you all again next week, as we're gonna be covering the week 3 for the WBE singles division. Thank you all for watching, and I'm gonna be seeing you guys later.